A question of leadership, with Barak back as Israel's Labour leader and Peres installed as the new Israeli president. What now for the turbulent politics of the Israeli state? And will the changes have any impact on the moribund Middle East peace process? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Jane Dutton. So, in Israeli politics, it seems that old leaders don't die or fade away. They simply come back for another term in office. Ehud Barak's time as Prime Minister ended 6 years ago with a failed peace deal and a landslide defeat to Ariel Sharon. But he's back, older, apparently wiser, and almost certainly wealthier after a reportedly lucrative stint in the private sector. And someone who's never really been away, Shimon Peres, is now installed as the new Israeli president. Meanwhile, the great survivor, Ehud Olmert, clings on to office despite his deep unpopularity. Now, on this edition of Inside Story, we'll consider what the most recent leadership changes mean for Israel and the wider Middle East. We also look at a leaked confidential report from the outgoing UN Middle East envoy that paints a damning picture of US involvement in the region. But first, Dr Gerson has this on the old faces at the top.
In Israel, it appears political exile is only temporary. The latest comeback is no exception. Former Prime Minister Ehud Barak has re-emerged as leader of the country's divided Labour Party. And with opposing Palestinian factions at war in Gaza, Barak's chosen to focus on defence.
I promise to put all my efforts, my knowledge, into strengthening the security forces and the Israeli Defence Force, and into restoring our military might and Israel's power of deterrence.
Under Barak's tenure as Prime Minister, Israeli troops withdrew from southern Lebanon. He also left a legacy of failed peace talks with Syria and the Palestinians at Camp David. But clearly, Barak isn't deterred by the past. It's likely he'll become Israel's new defence minister. And with a military background, he may refocus the country's defence strategy. On Palestinian issues, Barak doesn't accept refugees' right of return or sovereignty over the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Politically, the Labour Party he leads is struggling for legitimacy among the Israeli public. Labour holds less than a third of the seats in the ruling coalition. And while Barak says he'll pull his party out, it's most likely he'll wait until he's strengthened his position. He'll bide his time until he's ready to take on the country's Prime Minister, Ehud Olmert, for the top job. However, Olmert is facing his own problems. He's under pressure to resign over the handling of the war in Lebanon. And there's been another changing of the guard. Former Prime Minister Shimon Peres has achieved his long-held ambition to become the country's president. A largely ceremonial post, it's another example of Israel recycling previous leaders. Next week, Prime Minister Olmert heads to the US, aiming to show that despite his unprecedented unpopularity, there's still some political life left in him.
Well, to discuss what these changes might mean for Israel and the wider Middle East, we're joined from Tel Aviv by Dr Gerson, a former advisor to Ariel Sharon. And to get a Palestinian perspective, Case Abdulkarim, a member of the Palestinian Legislative Council, is in our Ramallah studio. Dr. Gerson, let me start off by saying that you are no great lover of the Labour Party, and we will get on to Ehud Barak in a moment. But let's first talk about Shimon Peres and his role as president. It's largely ceremonial, but what role do you think he will now play in politics?
Well, first of all, I think poetic justice has been achieved by the fact that, at the end of his political career, he has become the president of Israel. I think a well-deserved post for him, for the people, and definitely one that would represent Israel in the international community and restores perhaps the tarnished image of the presidency with the past events that took place, in the past year with the former president Katsav. I think, the presidency in Israel is really a symbolic institution. which symbolizes the unity of the people. But the fact that the law does not say what the president cannot do leaves a lot of leeway to someone like Peres, with so much experience, with so much knowledge, and with the energy to initiate certain, I would say, projects, definitely projects that could advance the cause of peace in the Middle East, that he will put more content into the presidency than his predecessor.
Can you talk with such positive gusto about Ehud Barak? I mean, he wasn't a success in the past, but what chances of him being a success now?
Well, I'm saying with regard to the new chairman of the Labour Party, Barak, what we actually seeing is a comeback of, as your reporter clearly mentioned, of old leaders, but I'd say wiser, sadder perhaps, but more experienced, and it shows the capacity of the Israeli political system to bounce back, to rejuvenate itself after the turmoil and the crisis that it suffered, I would say, in the past year since the war in Lebanon. So I would see the positive side of what is happening. We have now a more stable government. While there is still a lack of leadership, the leaders like Sharon are no longer present. This is, I would say, a government that presents a much more coherent team. You know, when you have Barak as defense minister and a new minister of finance and a whole new uplift for the government's face, this, of course, restores both Israel's credibility, the credibility of the government, our deterrence posture vis-a-vis what is happening, for example, in Gaza and in the north, and also vis-a-vis
let's talk about that, if I may, and
the United States.
Excuse me interrupting you, but let's go over to Mr. Abdulkarim, and I know that your thoughts are on what's happening in Gaza at the moment, and Hamas and Fatah fighting each other, and dozens of people have been killed. But what do you think about Ehud Barak coming back to the forefront of politics?
In the short term, I think that the election of Mr. Barak to be the head of the Labour Party may be a relief for Mr. Olmert and his government. But on a long-term basis, I think that the leadership crisis that the Israelis are now having is too deep, actually, to be changed or to be mended by personal changes. The main change perhaps will be that Mr. Barak, in his new post as defense minister, will be more aggressive and more inclined actually to military escalation against the Palestinians in order perhaps to regain the lost deterrence power of Israel.
And how do you think he'll do that? Any suggestions on how he will do that?
Maybe more aggressions in Gaza, maybe more active incursions into the cities of the West Bank, and more targeted killings, and all the other military options that could be imagined. And I think that Mr. Barak may be more informed on this question than Mr. Peretz, his predecessor.
Good. Dr. Gerson, I can see you shaking your head there.
Well, it's so easy and so convenient all the time to blame Israel for everything that happens in the Middle East. But the aggression now and the violence in Gaza is not a result of Israel's occupation. It's a result of the preoccupation with a culture of hatred, with the fact that the Palestinians, some groups in the Palestinian camp, have sold out the revolution to Iran and to other radical elements, and they're taking it over. It has nothing to do with Israel right now. On the contrary, we are trying to restore stability to the area. We would like to open negotiations, start talks with the Palestinian, but meanwhile, the Palestinian National Liberation Movement has been hijacked by Iran and by Al-Qaeda and other radical elements, and you can see the pictures in the streets of Gaza. It is not Israelis who are killing Palestinians.
Do you agree with that, Mr. Abdulkarim?
People who are suffering.
You cannot evade blaming Israel for what is happening after 40 years of occupation and expansion in settlement building and building the wall, and all the restrictions on the freedom of movement of Palestinians, and also the siege that is now being imposed even in Gaza, and the financial holding of Palestinian funds in order to make the Palestinian National Authority actually paralyzed. All this has also played a role in mounting up tension inside the Palestinian society, and has also played the role in the inner fighting that is going now in Gaza. And I agree, of course, that this infighting is a very sad picture, it's a very sad image, and we are doing our best actually to contain the situation.
Okay, if I could just say, I mean, even on air we can't seem to agree, but we're about to take a short break now, excuse me interrupting. Still to come, how US support for Israel has hindered peace efforts in the Middle East. We analyse the confidential thoughts of a key UN insider. Stay with Inside Story.